Hey Sam, have you heard about post-traumatic stress disorder? I was reading this article and it really hit me how serious it is, especially for people who deal with traumatic events regularly, like emergency service workers.
Yeah, PTSD is definitely a big issue. It's not just something soldiers deal with, though that's where most people tend to think about it. Even regular folks who go through a traumatic accident can develop PTSD. It's not talked about as much, but it's just as real for them.
Exactly. The article pointed out that victims, rescuers, and even witnesses can be affected. I hadn't really thought about the impact on rescuers or bystanders before. They might not have been directly injured, but just being there can leave a lasting impact.
That makes sense. It's like the brain gets overwhelmed by what it's seen or experienced, and if those feelings aren't addressed, they can manifest as PTSD later. It's almost like a hidden injury that doesn't show up until much later.
Right, and the symptoms can be so varied. They mention things like anxiety, hopelessness, and even physical symptoms like nausea and headaches. And then there are the cognitive issues, like difficulty concentrating or making decisions. It's really all-encompassing.
It's scary to think about how it can affect every part of a person's life. The emotional reactions, the physical symptoms, and then the delayed reactions too. It's like the trauma keeps coming back to haunt them, even years later.
The part about dissociation was interesting too. I guess it's a way the brain tries to protect itself during the trauma by shutting down emotions, but that can't last forever. Once the immediate danger is over, those emotions have to come out eventually.
That's true. The article even gave a warning about dissociation, saying it can't be kept up indefinitely. I can imagine that if someone tries to suppress those feelings for too long, it could lead to serious issues down the line.
They also talked about how PTSD can develop if someone isn't prepared or supported after a traumatic event. It really highlights the importance of having the right support system in place, whether it's friends, family, or professional help.
Definitely. And the diagnosis process seems pretty involved too. It's not just about experiencing trauma, it's also about how the person re-experiences it, tries to avoid triggers, and shows signs of increased arousal. All of these need to be present for over a month for it to be considered PTSD.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that even if someone has all the symptoms, if they're still functioning normally in their daily life, it might not be considered a serious psychological disorder. The symptoms have to cause some degree of disability for it to be classified as PTSD.
That's a good point. It's like the symptoms have to really interfere with their ability to live a normal life. And that's where treatment comes in. The article emphasized that treatment should be handled by specialists, but prevention is something everyone can work on.
Prevention was a big focus. They mentioned preparation, like training and mental readiness, as key to preventing normal stress reactions from turning into PTSD. It's about being realistic about what can and can't be done in a traumatic situation.
I agree. If people are better trained and mentally prepared, they're less likely to feel helpless or guilty if things don't go perfectly. That's why it's important to talk about these possibilities beforehand, so if something does happen, it's not as shocking or overwhelming.
And then there are the team strategies. I liked how they emphasized creating a supportive environment where team members can openly discuss their emotions. It's about dropping the macho attitude and admitting when you need help.
Yeah, that stood out to me too. The idea that it's a strength, not a weakness, to admit when you're not the best person for the job in a crisis. It's better to delegate than to try to tough it out and potentially make things worse.
They also mentioned debriefing as a way to process the trauma. I didn't realize how important it was to have both an emotional debrief and a technical debrief, and to do them in the right order. Addressing the emotional impact first helps ensure that everyone is in the right headspace for the technical analysis later.
It makes sense to deal with the emotional side first, so people aren't feeling defensive when it's time to look at what went wrong and what can be improved. It's about learning from the experience without letting the emotions cloud the judgment.
And the part about dealing with the press was interesting too. It can add so much stress to an already traumatic situation. The idea of appointing a press officer and preparing a statement ahead of time seems like a smart way to manage that.
Absolutely. Having someone who wasn't directly involved handle the press can really take the pressure off those who were. And having a prepared statement can prevent the media from running wild with speculation, which could just add to the trauma.
In the end, the article made it clear that sometimes professional help is necessary. If someone's reactions go beyond what's normal or start developing into PTSD, it's crucial to get that help. Friends and family can support, but they can't replace a trained professional.
Exactly. It's about recognizing when someone needs more than just a sympathetic ear and making sure they get the help they need before things get worse. It's all about being proactive, whether it's in prevention or in getting treatment.
This conversation really brought home how important it is to be aware of PTSD and how it can affect anyone, not just the obvious cases. It's something we all need to take seriously.
Agreed. Being informed and prepared can make a huge difference in how we handle traumatic events and support those who've been through them. It's something worth talking about more often.